Hi, my name is Rick. I'm a compulsive overeater. I would like to mention that I'm speaking for myself, and anything that I say has not been approved by the group conscience of Overeaters Anonymous, and I am not a spokesman for Overeaters Anonymous. But it's truly by the grace of God and the fellowship of Overeaters Anonymous and the program of Overeaters Anonymous that I found in a book called Alcoholics Anonymous that I am abstinent today, and I haven't found it necessary to have an eating binge in 988 days, one day at a time. For that, I'm very, very grateful. I do want to mention that before I did this in my adult life, I was like a drug addict who needed the fix of gorging myself that day. And I used to think that just somehow, magically, tomorrow I would eat healthy and everything would be fine. I thought that many, many times. But now I don't do that. I don't want those foods. I definitely don't want to go where those foods take me. They took me to weighing 310 pounds. There are 4 things in my program which I consider absolutely essential. Number 1 is to turn to God for help. It was never him that deserted me. I was the one who didn't follow his plan for my life. Number 2 is to work the 12 steps of Overeaters Anonymous. Number 3 would be in the fellowship of Overeaters Anonymous. And number 4, not to eat my alcoholic foods, my binge foods, my trigger foods, foods which I cannot stop from starting to eat them. And once I start eating them, I cannot stop. I would mention that I found some videos on YouTube which I like. What is the Best Diet for Humans by this man named Aaron Segal. This deals with the fact that different people have different binge foods. Different people react differently to the same foods. So any foods that I have to stay away from, somebody else may not have a problem with that food. And he goes into the science as to why that's true, and they've demonstrated that. I would also mention something on YouTube by Dr. Peak, Your Brain's Reward Center, Hacked by a Cupcake, Part 1. There's a Part 1, 2, and 3. They're all very good. And while I'm talking about that, your brain's reward center hacked by a cupcake, this is an interesting magazine, Nutrition Action Health Letter. I subscribe to that. And I'm going to just jump right down in this article. And if you will notice these brain scans, this is the brain scan of a normal weight person eating a certain food. This is the brain scan of an obese individual eating the same food. They're not getting the same rewards. Now, strangely enough, it's the same for a cocaine addict, and it's the same for an alcoholic. They do not get the stimulation from alcohol that a normal person gets. The only point I'm making here is that my brain is not like the brain of a normal eater. And somehow I am goofy enough that I continue, or before this program, I would continue to go back to eating those foods, which did me a huge amount of harm. You do not get to 310 pounds unless you have a serious problem with your eating. Now, I would also mention that I went to a place called the Hilton Head Health Institute in Hilton Head, South Carolina. I did that 11 years ago. They recommended this book here, The Volumetrics Eating Plan by Barbara Rawls. That's the number 1 book that they recommend. And as you can see on the cover, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This has the same calories as this. This is pretty satisfying when you eat it. Not so much. Makes you want to eat more. That's the plan that I follow, the volumetrics eating plan. There's another book by Brian Wanskin, Mindless Eating. This is the whole idea of eating off a smaller plate. It has to do with your perception of what you eat. I can't summarize the book effectively in the short time we have, but they did a study with secretaries and they told them they'd won a prize, and they would put Hershey's Kisses either on their desk or 6 feet away. And then they would either be in a clear container or an opaque container. And what they found, no surprise here, if it was on their desk in a clear container, they ate more of the Hershey's Kisses. If it was opaque, they didn't eat quite as many. And if it was 6 feet away, they ate even fewer. It's easier to change your environment than it is to change your mind. Now, this book was recommended by the people at the Hilton Head Health Institute. It's a good book. I got much more out of the other two, but this one, because they recommended it, that's why I'm mentioning it. Now, the book that I study now is the book called Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the book that is the recipe that shows you how to work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I have adapted those to deal with my compulsive overeating. The steps that you see on the wall are great, but that's just the ingredient list. This is a book which has helped tens of millions of people recover from their alcoholism. It has a proven track record. This is where I stake my future, in this book here. Now, I would mention a couple other books which I have studied. This one, The Beck Diet Solution, I thought it was a good book. And again, I'm not going to go too far into it, but this is the one that continues to talk about eating your food slowly while sitting down and enjoying every bite. This book also talks about distinguishing between a general desire to eat, a craving for a specific food, or physical hunger. It was very helpful to me to figure out what's physical hunger and, oh, I'm having a craving. Best example I know of is you walk into a bakery, you smell it, you remember eating those foods, and all of a sudden you really, really, really want something in the bakery. You're not physically hungry. You just have a craving for that food. This book was also, the method she talked about in this book was the way I got rid of my fear of being hungry. It's an exercise where you go between breakfast and dinner, don't eat any food all day, and every hour you write down how hungry am I and how anxious am I. And amazingly enough, I would get hungry during the day, but it didn't just keep getting worse and worse and worse. But I'm now to the point where I don't fear being hungry. I view it as a normal part of living. This is another good book. It was recommended at Hilton Head, The Tipping Point. In other words, sometimes small things, you put enough small things together and it can have a huge influence on what you do. And then I will mention this book. This book is kind of interesting. The End of Overeating, and how the food companies, I think they really do brain scans on people to find that bliss point with a certain amount of fat, sugar, and salt. And it makes the food hyper palatable. My worst hyper palatable food would be Oreo cookies. That is my worst binge food. Can't touch them, don't bring them in the house. I don't eat any of my binge foods, but that's my worst. Now, there are other things that have helped me in being able to control my weight. I set goals. I get some exercise. That's huge for me. I really think that sometimes a lot of people would think, oh, you just control your eating and the exercise doesn't matter. Well, it matters if you want to be fit. I want to be fit, and it helps me tremendously in controlling my weight. It helps me not to have as big a desire to overeat. I'm not saying this is important as working the 12 steps. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it is very helpful to me. I have a sponsor. I'm not sure if I'd still be around if I didn't have a sponsor in the Overeaters Anonymous program. And then things that I consider essential to my program. Pray every day, work all the steps to the best of my ability. Go to meetings, do meditation, have a sponsor, call my sponsor, be honest with my sponsor. Be honest with myself in a positive and negative manner. In other words, when I screw up, tell myself I screwed up. If I did good, I give myself credit. I have a food plan. I keep a food journal. I write down what I'm going to eat that day, my calorie targets for the day, and then when I eat something, I write it there. I've kept a food journal for the last 11 years. That was recommended to me at the Hilton Head Health Institute. And I write down when I exercise. There are different people that have inspired me through the years. I will only mention my uncle Jimmy Page. He fought in World War II. And he told me about being in a running battle for 3 days. No eating, no sleeping. Just trying to kill the Japanese. And the Japanese were trying to kill him and his other men. That's hard. This program is not hard. I want to return to what I was suggesting, that there are 4 essential things to me in my program. Number 1 is to turn to God for help. Number 2 is to work the 12 steps of the Overeaters Anonymous. Number 3 is to be in the fellowship of Overeaters Anonymous, which would mean going to meetings, making phone calls, listening to podcasts. And number 4, do not touch my alcoholic foods. I hope God will bless you in this program.